let's talk to another former leader of the Conservative Party, Conservative MP, Sir Iain Duncan Smith, who joins me in our studio in Manchester. Good morning to you.
Morning, Julia.
Is it not normally considered bad form for a Prime Minister to go on stage to talk to the Tory party faithful and basically criticise his predecessors?
Well, I guess it's the way to get his message talked about, and we're talking about it right now, I suppose. So, in a way, it's been done in the past. Most prime ministers at some point indicate that their predecessors left them with a bag of problems. So, it's usual start from a low point and then work up. So, no, I think what he's trying to get at, and in a way, he's probably the one person that can talk about it, because he's the first prime minister to lead post-Brexit. He's really referring back to some of the problems of Brexit. For example, when Blair decided not to block the accession 8 countries, people coming to the UK, as Germany did and others, we ended up with a huge number of people coming in, which really depressed wages, and I think did lead to the UK industry getting quite addicted to cheap labour, which had a damaging
There's been a lot of blame gaming going on at conference this week. There's a lot of criticism of the government, failure to plan, failure to listen to the warnings about things like HGV driver shortages and the like, and the problems there, which of course have impacted across the board. It's not just fuel, it is of course food supplies, we see hospitality. If you go to a restaurant these days, just tell us what you do have available on your menu as opposed to showing me a full menu. And we see the shelves not being stocked. The Prime Minister, though, and many of his cabinet ministers have been saying, including Kwasi Kwarteng, the business secretary, well, it's business. Business have been basically addicted to low-wage foreign workers, and they failed to prepare. Do you think business is going to take kindly to being told it's all their fault when they've been warning the Prime Minister and warning the government for the last few years that there's a problem coming?
Yeah, there is a problem coming, and to be fair, you need to divide who can do this and who takes responsibility. Government can do the big things. So, for example, one of the big things post-Brexit is to get the regulatory burden that was putting the costs on business and stultifying areas which we can move into. I wrote a big report for the government on this called Tigger. That's a big thing they can do, and that will help industry enormously if we get it done. One of the major reasons for leaving the European Union is to get our own regulations back, and they can do some of the very short-term stuff, like maybe opening up some visas to get a few extra drivers in. But the truth does lie in the fact that business in the long run has themselves turned away from what were big long-term problems that required investment. Now, I know many businessmen around the world, and I've talked to them, and they always refer to the UK in the last 15 to 20 years as addicted to low pay and no investment. We are behind so many countries' investment in technology, in equipment, and in training. So this has got to turn around, and business has to do that as well. So each takes the blame. And when they say business has been warning them, they have been warning them, but the truth is they've not been listening to their own warnings. And I said before on this interview, I trained as an HGV driver many years ago, and I know there was a point when that cheap labour started coming in that HGV companies stopped training drivers, and therefore they built this problem knowing full well it was going ahead. So it was one thing to warn the government, it's another to do something about it as well. So there is a balance here.
Okay, well, he's also going to be talking about levelling up, ending this north-south divide, the idea that you have to, if you want to get ahead, you want to get a good job, want to go into the professions, want to run a successful business, you have to leave basically large parts of the country, certainly the north half of the country, and leaving the Midlands even, to go to London. That's where, that's where the pavements are paved with gold and nowhere else. That is a policy that will be very popular, of course, with red wall voters. But how do you actually do this? We've heard so much about this agenda, levelling up. No one really knows what it means, or what. And even Neil O'Brien, one of the ministers in Michael Gove's department, he's done a speech on this. Still couldn't work out what it is. The practical policies that are actually going to make a difference to people's lives.
I think it should be very simple, but I think the government has made it a bit too complex. The reality is, one of the problems that we face is, first of all, in the whole of Europe, the UK doesn't have a productivity problem. London and the South East have the highest productivity pretty much in Europe. But no other region in the UK meets the average of the UK's productivity, which means ours is a regional problem, which means places like the North East and the North West and the Midlands, they have much lower skilling, much lower productivity than London and the South East. So if you're going to level up, the answer is very simple. You have to get that skills training, the investment, business investment into those areas to bring them up to the level of London and the South East, which are overcrowded, full far too much of people going to London for work, when much of that work this day in sort of internet world can be done from places like Manchester, for Leeds and Newcastle. We should be investing there. That's what levelling up means. Level up the regions in skills and in training, equipment, investment and technology. That brings the jobs, that brings the higher pay, that's levelling up. Just simply talking about it doesn't work. This is a longer term process, has to start now, and the government must get on with it.
Okay, well, starting now, we are going to see, as of today, universal credit and that £20 a week uplift announced 18 months ago to get people through the pandemic. That is going to be ending today. There have been a lot of calls, a lot of attempts in Parliament to stop it. You've been among those saying that this is the wrong decision. This, though, at the time, the Prime Minister, we understand, is going to be talking about a minimum wage rise up to £9.42 an hour for people aged over 23. That would be a 5.7% pay rise, but it's what was recommended by the Low Pay Commission already, so 900 plus a year before tax for workers who are doing a 35-hour week. At a time when universal credit's being cut, where the national insurance rates are going up, when the tax thresholds means basically, to all intents and purposes, a tax rise for pretty much everybody. Inflation going up, energy costs going up, fuel's gone up, supermarket prices, we know with the HGV problem, are going up. We've used this phrase a million times, perfect storm, but it is very much a perfect storm. Is the government really left hand not understanding what the right hand doing, talking about levelling up at a time when they're putting taxes up on the very poorest people and cutting benefits for the people on the lowest incomes as well by losing universal credit?
Yeah, let's start from the government has to take credit, but it's not necessarily this government, it's predecessor governments, for making a step change in the minimum wage. There's no question, under a previous Conservative government of Cameron, we really jacked that minimum wage up much faster and higher. It's higher than any other workplace in Europe at the time, and it's still rising. So all that is positive about people in work. There's no point in having minimum wage so low that people can just get paid very awful wages. So that's a positive when you're in work. I'm opposed to this sudden reduction in universal credit, A, at all, and B, now. If we deal with the now, all the stuff you just talked about is heading in our direction. We know that. Sometimes when governments govern, they've just got occasionally to be flexible enough to say, do you know what, I think we just need to take a rain check on this and see where things are going before we finally move on this. And I think that's the moment now. I think what we need to do is give ourselves 4 or 5 months before you may even make this change, if you have to, just to see where people's incomes are in, say, January, February, etc., to say, well, okay, fine. 2, universal credit is an in-work benefit to get people up.
Of course, you were a former Work and Pension Secretary that brought universal credit in. I
designed it and brought it in, so it's helpful, it gets people into work. But it also deals with those who can't get into work for various reasons, and there are some people who have conditions and problems that make it very difficult for them to have regular work. So it's there to support people and put a floor under them. They're the ones that aren't able, therefore, even if you lift the minimum wage, to get affected by it. So my concern at the moment is we just don't know as we come out of COVID. You take the furlough off, we've got 1 million people at least on furlough. We're not quite sure where the market is going. We just need to pause. And the final thing is, I do think that the government needs to consider very carefully that if it's pro-work, universal credit is the best mechanism to get people in those difficult conditions back into work. It supports them, and so cutting it like this now makes it more difficult to get them into work, not better. So I have lots of respect for the government's decisions. I understand what Rishi's on about. Got to get the economy right, got to get our balance payments right, but at the same time, I simply say sometimes in government just need to pause for a second and think again. Is
there an issue in government that we've had Oliver Dowden, the new party chairman, talking about, office workers need to get off their pelotons and get back to the office? Peloton's what, $1,350 to buy, £40 a month membership as well. I mean, these are very expensive luxury items.
I don't even know what a Peloton is.
and then £20 a week being taken from people at the very bottom of the pile. Is there there's quite a lot of concern. This is an out-of-touch Tory government that has no understanding how an awful lot of people live.
Well, I think the government knows this is a difficult decision, and I've talked to various government ministers, and quietly some of them are concerned about it. Obviously, they won't say so publicly. But I just have a very simple message. If you want to level up, and nobody wants to level up more than I do, I wrote a report on it for the previous government about 2 or 3 years ago, you need to start with a floor somewhere. And if that floor goes down, then it's very difficult for you to get up. Okay. And my point is, keep the floor in place at least for the moment. Let's see where we are in the next 3 to 4 months, I beg them.
Let me also ask you about French fishermen. I mean, who knows if we're going to be at war with the French, because that would cheer everyone up in the conference hall, I'm sure. French fishermen last night threatening to blockade Calais and the Channel Tunnel to stop all trade going in and out of the country from mainland Europe. Obviously, everyone's concerned about the Christmas supplies already, making that even more of an issue. This is all over those fishing permits and the small number that were granted around the water around Jersey. We've even had a threat from the French government about cutting off electricity to Jersey. She's a leading Brexiteer and campaigner on this front. What do you make of us yet again, of the fishing rights, basically being in conflict with the French?
Zut alors, I say. No, this is perennial and it will go on forever, and it was going on before Brexit. You know, the French are heading for an election. They've got a French president who's not doing very well in the polls, and a lot of shift and change in politics in France. And of course, any chance to pull the tail of the lion will be taken with glee. So a lot of this stuff is sort of engineered in France, I believe, as part of this process. As we're standing up to perfidious Albion, and we will not let them get away with stealing our fishing rights. So this gone on, but they went on before. They used to, you know, when we were in the EU, they blockaded and rammed fishing boats off the northern coast of France. So, yeah, the government's got to try and resolve this with the French. But the truth is, there's no reason why we should back down. We negotiated something. Hard luck. If the French don't like it, they should go and kick the backside of the EU negotiators. And the UK has got to protect our property, Channel Islands, their fishermen. Quite right. But, you know, it's all part of the French election. You know, they're going to say, we standing up. Well, good luck to them.
Sir Iain Duncan Smith, Conservative MP, of course, former leader of the Conservative Party. Thank you very much indeed for joining